I love this reading, and every time I hear it, I feel like the sermon should be called Now You See Me, Now You Don't. We talked a little bit about this earlier in our Lenten series and in our Easter series, how sometimes we like to jump to the end game, to the wonderment of Easter, and thinking, okay, thank God everything's good now, right? But this story reminds us that even in the resurrection, things are not always as good as we had hoped they would be, right? The road to Emmaus, first of all, you would think that my favorite part would be, that the women were the ones who saw him first. But actually, my favorite part is as they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on, but they urged him, saying, "Stay with us." My wife and I have this game, and I am sure that you played the same game with somebody in your life. The I love you more game, right? The whole notion of I love you more. No, you don't. Yes, I do. It's not really a competition. Well, in my house, it's a competition, but it's not really a competition because you can't have that conversation with another, right? Unless you already know they love you more, but then you love them more and they love you more. You're not going to say that to somebody you don't know, right? The relationship is there and it is bound, and so it exists that I love you more shows up in that space. When I read this reading, for some reason I come to that place where I think that as I'm kind of jumping ahead here. This wasn't really how I was going to do this, so forgive me. But I get tangential. That this idea of Jesus appearing to various and sundry individuals was his way of saying, no, I love you more. They were already devastated and upset, right? Because they loved him. And he pops in and says, nope, I love you more. The road to Emmaus, I'm going to sneeze. The road to Emmaus, did you get that on the recording, David? Okay. Excuse me. Offers a plethora of interpretive possibilities. And I could spend an enormous amount of time going over biblically or historically, contextually, rhetorically, literally, however you want to do this, what these various and sundry interpretations are. I've heard that there is no particular place called Emmaus. You look at this up historically, you find perhaps 9 different places that could have been called Emmaus. So Emmaus becomes everywhere and nowhere at the same time. We have 2 individuals who have been identified not necessarily as part of the original troop of disciples, but those who were affected nonetheless, who are leaving Jerusalem, probably getting out as fast as they can, quite frankly, because it was a terrifying event, and having this deep, profound conversation about what just happened. How did that happen? That's not how that was supposed to go down. What is going on here? And then what about all this stuff about people seeing it? What is this? This does not make any sense to us. And then in their midst is a stranger that shows up to walk with them. Now, we can have a lot of fun with that too. We can look at this as the journey upon which we all travel, right? That road to Emmaus is different for each and every one of us. We can imagine that couple are having this conversation, and whether or not there is a literal person that shows up with them, or a sudden transformational awareness that, oh, wait, he's still here, because look, we're talking about him. He's still here. It really doesn't matter. The point is that whatever the impact was that this man had on the lives of these people, was still profoundly, actively involved. And so they're having this conversation. Jesus shows up. And they continue their walk. Now, here's my favorite part. Jesus says, you all have a great day. See you later. I'm going to keep going. No, stay with us. Don't go. We've enjoyed your company. Come in and stay with us. You know, you've told us great things. You've made us feel good. We are recognizing something that we've missed in the conversations that we're having. Come on in. It's late. Come in and stay. They invited him to stay. So he showed up and said, I love you. They responded, we love you more, so stay. He comes in, he breaks the bread and gives them the cup. And in this profound example of remembering, you're suddenly aware that he's really there. Again, really or really present among them. This transformation, this understanding, this life and relationship that they've had with this man is burned into their hearts, their souls, their beings. In the breaking of the bread, they remember their sorrow is turned to joy. When I was 19 years old, between my first and second semester in college, I found myself being diagnosed with melanoma and had to go in for surgery. It was topical. It was, ironically, over Easter. How's that? And while I was in recovering from the surgery that I'd had, my parents came in to visit me and announced that my dad had just been diagnosed with cancer. So here I am recovering from this, and they're coming in saying, and dad is going in next week. During the 4 years or the next 3.5 years where I finished college, he underwent numerous treatments, most of which I wasn't present for because I was away at school. When I graduated from college, I immediately moved down to Baltimore, where I was a Jesuit volunteer. So for a year, I worked with a bunch of other crazy college graduates who thought they could change the world in a year, and worked in a shelter for homeless women, and kept in close touch, about 200 miles from where my family lived. Ironically, he deteriorated, but ironically, he died 2 days after Easter. There's a lot that happened in those 2 days that I'm going to try to share with you now, because even after all this time, it still gets to me. I had come home two weeks before, and it was clear that he was on limited time, and I wanted to stay. Typical Irish Catholic, pull yourself up, former priest. Nope, you got to go back to work. When it became clear around Good Friday and Holy Saturday that he was probably not going to live much longer than a week, I went home. I had to work on Easter Sunday, and I drove home that evening, and I got there, and he pulled himself out of bed, came to the dinner table, because I had come home for dinner. He didn't eat anything. He drank a little bit of Martini and Rossi Asti Spumante, which was like the consummate drink that our family shared during holidays. And then he went back to bed. Monday, my mother and I planned his service. April 30th. Is that right? No, March. Sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. And as only my father could do, he died on April Fool's Day. To know him was to understand the profundity of that act. In our final conversations, I'll give you an example of why he would be the jokester. Is my father grew up in New York, in the Bronx, and spent a lot of time on Long Island. I want you to imagine, for those of you who are more local, 25 between Castle Rock and Denver during rush hour. My father was in bed nearing the end, and I asked him if he was afraid. He goes, "Nope, it could be worse." I said, "Dad, how could it be worse?" I said, "Well, I could be on the Long Island Expressway." It's a hideous road. That was the second to last thing he said. The last thing was basically, "I love you more." Now, after his service and 2 weeks later, I went back to my job and got very much actively involved in that process of back to work. Worked with a homeless shelter. Obviously, it was very distracting and very work intensive. Another time, and for the next year, I became her parent, as she would call me every day and need to be cared for. It was easy for me to bypass grief because I had so many distractions. But the thing that allowed me to both grieve and remember was my last hour with him. So I would find a space where I would allow myself to replay the entire last hour. And while it began as a way to grieve, it then plugged me in to every other memory I had ever had of him. So that to this day, look at me now, right? The wet rag. I can still recall the last hour. We moved to tears and sorrow, but also immense joy at the gift of having been there for that period of time. But also the way there's every other memory. When think about Jesus on the road to Emmaus and what his friends that he had spent most of his adult life with, loving and playing, and arguing, fighting and disappointing. I can't help thinking to myself, in the memory of that walk, in the memory of his teaching, in the memory of the breaking of the bread, it must be designed to do the same thing. We're so far removed from the communion table. We are so far removed from the story of Jesus, other than something that we refer to here and there, that I think we forget that it allows us to enter the story from our own life experiences. That we are invited into the space to both feel immense sorrow, but also profound joy. As we remember not the death and resurrection or what happened over Holy Week, and the fact that even in the resurrection, he's not there anymore. But we get to then go back and remember and live into the resurrection. So that every time we show up in this space, every time that we claim that we are followers of the one, right, of the way, we are saying that we are remembering all of it, right? So we can't enter Easter season or even participate in Easter season without embracing the entire last hour, as it were. Now, we tell you this for two reasons. acknowledge the obvious theological and brilliance of the sermon. And I'm also reading it's different. I have shared this information with council a couple of weeks ago in preparation for today. My last day will be the 29th. I can offer to you, as you have probably gleaned over the past year, there has been a little bit of a shift in my call with regard to the work that I have been focusing on. And there's also a promise to my wife to get her home. She has been here with me for 9 years, supporting me in my ministry. And she misses her family and her friends. And I have also, over the past 2 years, with some profound losses in my family, recognized that time, and I miss them terribly. I guess this is where that path to Emmaus emerges. While this is going to sound like Claire using humor to deflect, and it probably is a little bit, I want to share something with you that I shared with council. There was a question that said, are you going to another church? And since there are no children in the room, I will say, oh, hell no. This church has ruined me. This church has ruined me. And what I mean by that is you have spoiled me in my ability to be a pastor in this space that I will never have any patience for another church. That is not a joke. Your ability to stretch, be challenged, be annoyed, be frustrated, and continue to show up in order to live into what it means to be true followers of Jesus, this thing we call the Christian way, as it should be, as I believe, is profound in ways that you won't know. And I know I've said that to you, but you really need to hear that. I would not have the patience to be in another church right now, because I don't believe that they can do what you do. Maybe sometime they can. It's not really a fair statement, but I don't care. The other thing is that we all have to do our work around grief and leaving and loss. And I would be a lousy pastor to another church because of the amount of grief that I feel leaving you.
We will have time between now and when I leave to have conversations. I will be available. Take whatever you want to give me with regard to goodbyes or how dare yous. This is usually the part where I ask you if you have any questions, and I don't know if that's an appropriate thing to do right now. But nor do I want to ignore your responses if you have one right now. Bottom line is, every ministry I've done thus far, every church, every group, I love you all. For those of you who are new, you've got probably more than you bargained for this morning. I hope in what I've shared, the takeaway that you take is how brilliant this church is. Is because of that brilliance of community. Your ability to care for one another and to care for those who are not in this space. And I know I can leave. It is because of your love that you share for not just what is, but what can be, that I know this community will be sustained. My favorite lines in the Jesus' discourses in the Gospel of John is when he says to his disciples, "You will do far greater things than I've ever done." I have never been with a group where I have felt that to be the truth more than with this group. We've created this community to be there for each other, not just for the world, but for this little global village in which we live, move, and have our being. We have done that by sharing our joys and concerns, by sharing who we are, who we wish to be, and making ourselves vulnerable to one another. I don't know if that's someplace that you want to go today, but it is definitely a place I would like to invite you to enter. Continue sharing your joys and concerns in this space with one another. And whether you do that out loud today or keep it in your hearts, that is up to you. But I will invite you to share any joys or concerns at this time.